Chapter 3 of Part 2. He gave them the law of life as their inheritance. Section 1. The ethical problem. The moral norm and the truth of the language of the body. General audience number 118 of July 11th, 1984. The reflections about human love in the divine plan carried out so far would remain in some way incomplete if we did not try to see their concrete application in the area of conjugal and familial morality. We want to take this further step, which will bring us to the conclusion of our by now long journey, under the guidance of an important pronouncement of the recent magisterium, the encyclical Humanae Vitae, which Pope Paul VI published in July 1968. We will reread this significant document in the light of the conclusions we reached when we examined the original divine plan and Christ's words referring to it. The Church teaches that each and every marriage act, qui libet matrimonii usus, must remain through itself open to the transmission of life. That teaching, often set forth by the magisterium, is founded upon the inseparable connection willed by God and unable to be broken by man on his own initiative between the two meanings of the conjugal act, the unitive meaning and the procreative meaning. Humanae Vitae, paragraphs 11 and 12. The considerations I am about to propose will refer particularly to the passage of the encyclical that deals with the two meanings of the conjugal act and their inseparable connection. I do not intend to present a commentary on the whole encyclical, but rather to explain one passage at greater depth. From the point of view of moral doctrine contained in the document quoted, that passage has a central significance. At the same time, it is a text strictly linked with our earlier reflections about marriage in the dimension of the sacramental sign. Since, as I said, it is a central passage of the encyclical, it is obviously inserted very deeply in its structure. Thus, the analysis of this passage must point us toward the various parts of that structure, even if we do not intend to comment on the whole text. In the reflections about the sacramental sign, we already said several times that this sign is based on the language of the body reread in the truth. The truth at stake here is affirmed for the first time at the beginning of marriage, when the new spouses, by promising to be faithful to each other always and to love and honor each other all the days of their lives, become ministers of marriage as a sacrament of the church. We're also dealing with a truth that is, so to speak, always affirmed anew. In fact, as man and woman live in marriage until death, in some sense they continuously repropose the sign they themselves gave through the liturgy of the sacrament on the day of their wedding. The words of Paul VI encyclical quoted above concern the moment in the common life of the couple in which the two, by being united in the conjugal act, become one flesh, according to the biblical expression, Genesis chapter 2, verse 24. Precisely in this moment, so rich in meaning, it is also particularly important that the language of the body be reread in the truth. This reading becomes an indispensable condition for acting in the truth or for behaving in conformity with the value and the moral norm. The encyclical does not merely recall this norm, but also tries to give its adequate foundation. In order to clarify more deeply that inseparable connection willed by God between the two meanings of the conjugal act, Paul VI writes in the sentence after this as follows: by its intimate structure, the conjugal act, while most closely uniting husband and wife, capacitates them for the generation of new lives, according to laws inscribed in the very being of man and of woman. Humanae Vitae, paragraph 12. We observe that in the preceding sentence, the text just quoted deals above all with meaning, and in the sentence after this, with the innermost structure, that is, nature of conjugal relations. When it defines this innermost structure, the text refers to laws inscribed in the very being of man and woman. The transition from the sentence expressing the moral norm to the sentence explaining it and giving its reasons is particularly significant. The encyclical leads one to look for the foundation of the norm, determining the morality of the actions of man and woman in the conjugal act, in the nature of this act itself, and more deeply still in the nature of the acting subjects themselves. In this way, the innermost structure or nature of the conjugal act constitutes the necessary basis for an adequate reading and discovery of the meanings that must be carried over into the consciousness and the decisions of the acting persons. It also constitutes the necessary basis for grasping the adequate relationship of these meanings, namely their inseparability. Since the conjugal act at one and the same time deeply unites husband and wife and together makes them able to generate new lives, and since the one as well as the other thing comes about by its innermost structure, it follows that the human person must, this is the necessity proper to reason, logical necessity, read at one and the same time the two meanings of the conjugal act and also the inseparable connection between the two meanings of the conjugal act. Nothing else is at stake here than reading the language of the body in the truth, as has been said several times in the earlier biblical analyses. The moral norm, constantly taught by the Church in the sphere, recalled and reconfirmed by Paul VI in his encyclical, springs from reading the language of the body in the truth. What is at stake here is the truth. First, in the ontological dimension, the innermost structure, and then, as a consequence, in the subjective and psychological dimension, the meaning. The text of the encyclical underlines that in this case, we are dealing with a norm of the natural law.